Michael and Laura Foster were the kind of couple people envied, a picture of success, love, and stability in the quiet town of Maplewood. To neighbors, they were perfect, a beautiful home, two bright children, and smiles that never seemed to fade. But behind those smiles lay secrets too heavy to hide, whispers of betrayal, fear, and danger creeping closer with every passing night. When the truth finally surfaced, it didn't just destroy a family. It shattered the illusion of perfection that had fooled an entire community. In the quiet suburban town of Maplewood, the Foster family represented everything people dreamed of. Their home sat neatly on a tree-lined street where every house looked almost identical, yet theirs always seemed to stand out. The freshly cut lawn, blooming rose bushes, and a white porch swing that creaked gently in the wind made their house picture perfect. To anyone passing by, it looked like the home of a family with no worries, no secrets, and no reason for sorrow. Michael Foster, the father, was a well-known architect, admired not just for his success but for his generosity. His wife Laura worked as a school counselor, known for her warmth and kindness. Their teenage daughter Emily was a top student, quiet and polite, while their 10-year-old son Ryan was full of life and curiosity. Together they seemed like the kind of family people envied, a family who had it all. Every morning began the same way. Michael would back his sleek car out of the driveway with a wave to his neighbors. Laura would water the flowers, and the children would head off to school hand in hand. Their social media pages were filled with smiling pictures from family picnics, holidays, and birthday parties. They were the couple everyone wanted to be, the parents everyone admired. Yet beneath that polished image, something invisible was spreading, something darker than anyone could have imagined. It started subtly. The perfect routine began to falter. Michael stopped attending community events, often working late hours that no one could verify. Laura, once the life of neighborhood gatherings, grew distant and withdrawn. She stopped smiling as often, her eyes showing a quiet sadness she couldn't explain away. Emily began skipping her after-school activities, locking herself in her room for hours and deleting her social media accounts without warning. Ryan, once cheerful and talkative, became anxious, jumping at small noises and refusing to sleep alone. Neighbors noticed, but no one asked questions. In Maplewood, people preferred polite distance over uncomfortable truths. The Fosters were still the Fosters after all, successful, kind, and respectable. Any sign of trouble was brushed aside as ordinary family stress. But those who lived closest to them couldn't ignore the sounds that started echoing through the night. There were muffled arguments, slamming doors, and sometimes Laura's quiet sobs that carried faintly through the open windows. One evening, a neighbor named Mrs. Turner saw Laura standing alone in the yard long after dark, staring at the house as if afraid to go back inside. When Mrs. Turner waved, Laura quickly turned away and went inside without a word. That same week, Michael's car was seen parked outside the house all night, though he claimed to be working late at the office. Then one morning, the front window was shattered, glass glittering on the lawn. Michael said a tree branch had fallen during the storm, but the night had been calm. The story didn't make sense, but no one pushed for the truth. Behind the closed doors of the Foster home, pressure was building like a storm waiting to break. Michael's business was quietly failing, his debts growing faster than he could hide them. Laura had found out about financial troubles and something else, a secret that tore her trust apart. She had discovered a side of Michael she never knew, a man capable of deception far beyond her understanding. Their marriage, once built on love and ambition, had turned into a silent war of fear and resentment. Emily had seen more than her parents realized. Late at night, she would hear their whispers, accusations, pleas, threats. She began writing about it in a notebook she hid beneath her mattress, pages filled with confusion and dread. Ryan, too young to understand, sensed the tension but couldn't explain it. His once bright eyes had dulled, his laughter fading day by day. On the outside, the Fosters continued to smile for photos, greet their neighbors, and wave as if nothing was wrong. But behind the doors of that beautiful White House, something irreversible was taking shape. Every lie, every secret, and every silent cry was leading them toward a moment none of them could escape. The perfect family was cracking from within, and no one, not their friends, not their neighbors, not even they themselves, realized that the mask was about to fall. The morning of July 14th began like any other in Maplewood, sunlight pouring through quiet streets, birds chirping on telephone wires, and the faint hum of lawnmowers echoing in the distance. But by mid-morning that peaceful rhythm was shattered. A 911 call came from a neighbor who reported hearing a loud scream, followed by what sounded like a crash and then complete silence. Within minutes, 2 patrol cars arrived at the Foster residence, their flashing lights cutting through the calm neighborhood. What the officers found inside would haunt the town for years to come. The front door was unlocked, the hallway dim and eerily quiet. There was no sound, no footsteps, no voices, not even the hum of the refrigerator. The officers called out for anyone inside, but no one answered. A faint metallic smell lingered in the air, unmistakable to anyone who had ever been near death. They followed the trail into the living room, where the horror began to unfold. Michael Foster lay slumped against the couch, a gun near his hand, blood pooling beneath him. His expression was frozen in something between shock and terror. Upstairs, the silence deepened into something unbearable. Laura was found in the master bedroom, her body lying across the bed, her eyes open and lifeless. Emily's room was next. Her phone still glowed faintly on the bedside table, displaying a half-written message that would never be sent. Ryan's room was the last, his small figure still tucked under the covers as if he had fallen asleep and never woken up. The officers stood in stunned silence, unable to comprehend how such violence could exist within the walls of a home that had seemed so full of love. Within hours, police tapes surrounded the house and news crews arrived, their cameras capturing the sight of a once idyllic home now turned into a crime scene. The initial theory spread quickly through the town. Michael Foster had killed his family before taking his own life. The story was simple, tragic, and believable. People whispered that financial stress had driven him over the edge. Others speculated about a secret affair or mental breakdown. Everyone had their own version of the truth, but no one actually knew what had happened that night. The coroner's report seemed to support the initial assumption. The cause of death for Laura and the children was gunshot wounds, all inflicted within minutes of one another. Michael's body bore a single gunshot wound to the head. The gun found near him was registered in his name. Police labeled it a murder-suicide, and for a moment the case seemed closed. But beneath the surface, something didn't fit. Detective Aaron Whitmore, one of the lead investigators, noticed small inconsistencies. The gun, though belonging to Michael, had no fingerprints, not even his. The angle of the gunshot wound didn't match a self-inflicted trajectory. There were faint traces of mud on the carpet near the back door, suggesting someone else might have entered the house. Most strangely, the house alarm had been turned off manually at 2:47 a.m., even though the family was known for keeping it on every night. The neighbors were questioned, but no one had seen anyone enter or leave. One neighbor, however, mentioned seeing a dark vehicle parked near the house around midnight. At the time, she thought nothing of it. Maplewood was the kind of place where people still left their doors unlocked. But now every detail seemed to matter. The more detectives searched, the more questions they uncovered. Why had Laura's jewelry box been emptied? Why were there no signs of struggle, even though every member of the family had been shot in different rooms? And why did Laura's cell phone history show a string of unanswered calls to an unknown number just hours before her death? The story of the perfect family had become the town's greatest nightmare. The press labeled it the Foster Family Massacre, and the story spread beyond Maplewood, drawing national attention. But for those who had known the family, it didn't add up. They couldn't believe Michael, a devoted father, a loving husband, was capable of something so monstrous. Something was missing, and as the days passed, the truth began to look far more complicated than anyone had imagined. By the end of that week, The official narrative started to crumble. Evidence that had seemed clear was now uncertain. The supposed murder weapon might not have been fired by Michael at all. Detectives were forced to reopen the case and search for a different story, one that might reveal that the Fosters' tragedy was not born from rage or despair, but from something even darker waiting in the shadows. The investigation into the Foster family deaths took a sharp turn as detectives began combing through every detail of their final days. The murder-suicide theory no longer made sense. There were too many inconsistencies, too many unanswered questions. Detectives started over, examining financial records, phone logs, and security footage from nearby streets. What they uncovered began to reveal a life very different from the one the Fosters had shown to the world. Michael Foster's financial situation was unraveling. His once thriving architecture business had been quietly collapsing under mounting debt. Several projects had failed, and he had borrowed large sums of money from private lenders, many of whom had stopped being patient. Investigators discovered that just weeks before his death, Michael had withdrawn over $50,000 in cash, yet none of it could be accounted for. His office computer contained emails with veiled threats from someone demanding repayment. Whoever was behind those messages wasn't a stranger. They knew Michael personally. Laura's phone offered another layer to the mystery. Her messages painted a picture of fear and secrecy. She had been reaching out to a close friend from work, describing sleepless nights and a growing sense that she was being watched. In one message, she wrote that she felt unsafe in her own home and that Michael was hiding something from her. Another message mentioned a strange man parked near their street multiple nights in a row. That man, as investigators would soon learn, was not just any stranger. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood again, asking if anyone remembered seeing unusual activity. Several neighbors confirmed the presence of a black SUV that had been parked near the Fosters' home at odd hours. Surveillance footage from a gas station down the road captured that same vehicle at 11:42 p.m., the night before the murders. When police traced the license plate, it led them to a name that would change the entire course of the case: Tyler Grant. Tyler was a former employee of Michael's construction firm, fired 6 months earlier for stealing company funds. He had a history of violent behavior and a record that included assault and burglary. He had also filed a lawsuit against Michael for wrongful termination, which had been dismissed just weeks before the murders. As detectives dug deeper, they found something even more alarming. Tyler had been seen arguing with Michael outside his office shortly before the murders, though no formal report had been made. It was becoming clear that Tyler had both motive and opportunity, but the link between Tyler and the Fosters didn't end with Michael. Laura's phone records showed multiple calls exchanged between her and Tyler over several weeks. The tone of the messages was personal, too personal. Investigators suspected an affair. It explained why Laura had grown distant, why she looked anxious in the days leading up to her death. It also raised an even darker question. Had Tyler's relationship with Laura turned into something dangerous? Detectives theorized that Laura might have been planning to leave Michael and start over with Tyler, but when she discovered who Tyler really was and what he wanted, things might have spiraled out of control. Tyler's criminal record showed a pattern of manipulation and control. He had a history of threatening former partners, often using fear to get what he wanted. Perhaps Laura tried to end things, and Tyler refused to let her go. A deeper forensic analysis of the crime scene revealed new details that supported the theory of an outside intruder. A partial shoe print found near the back entrance matched the same brand and size Tyler was known to wear. There was also trace DNA on the doorknob that didn't belong to any member of the Foster family. These clues shifted the investigation completely. Detectives now believed the massacre was not a family tragedy, but a calculated act of revenge. Tyler Grant, fueled by anger and desperation, had likely returned to the Foster home seeking money, payback, or both. What began as blackmail had ended in bloodshed. Still, until they found Tyler, everything remained speculation. He had disappeared without a trace, no phone activity, no credit card use, and no sightings. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. The town of Maplewood, once calm and safe, was gripped by fear. The perfect family everyone admired had become victims of a nightmare none could explain. As police widened their search for Tyler Grant, one question lingered in the air. How could such evil hide behind a familiar face for so long without anyone seeing it? Days turned into weeks, and the search for Tyler Grant stretched beyond Maplewood. Detectives followed every lead, tracing his last known movements through bank withdrawals, motel check-ins, and abandoned vehicles. But just as they felt closer to finding him, a discovery inside the evidence room forced the investigation to take another unexpected turn. Forensic analysis on the gun from the crime scene came back with shocking results. It wasn't registered to Michael Foster as initially believed. The weapon belonged to Laura Foster. Even more surprising, gunshot residue was found on her hands, suggesting that she had fired the weapon. The discovery upended everything investigators thought they knew about the case. Detectives now faced a disturbing new possibility. What if Laura had killed her family? The theory seemed impossible. She was described by friends and coworkers as gentle, patient, and devoted to her children. But the evidence was there and no one could ignore it. Perhaps Laura had reached a breaking point after years of hidden marital problems and financial pressure. The public was quick to turn its gaze on her. News stations ran headlines speculating that the perfect wife had secretly snapped. Still, something about that explanation didn't sit right with Detective Whitmore. He believed Laura had pulled the trigger, but not out of rage, out of fear. Searching deeper, detectives obtained a warrant to examine a storage locker registered under Laura's name. Inside, among old boxes and furniture, they found a weathered leather journal sealed in a plastic bag. The entries inside were a window into Laura's unraveling life. The early pages were filled with ordinary things: grocery lists, memories of her children, and short notes about her work. But gradually the writing shifted. She described sleepless nights feeling watched and arguments with Michael about money that she didn't understand. She wrote about discovering something in his office, something she never clearly described but said changed everything. Her tone grew darker as the entries went on, until one entry mentioned a man she called T. That single initial was all detectives needed to connect the dots. Laura's words revealed she had been involved in a secret relationship with Tyler Grant. She wrote about meeting him months before her death, describing him as intense but charming. But soon her entries became filled with fear. Tyler had become possessive, showing up uninvited and threatening to expose their affair if she didn't help him get money from Michael. Laura's final entry was dated 3 days before the murders. Her handwriting trembled as she wrote, "He says he'll take everything from me if I don't do what he asks. I'm scared for the kids. I don't know what to do anymore." That final message shifted the investigation once again. It now seemed clear that Laura hadn't killed her family. Willingly, she had been trapped in a dangerous web spun by Tyler Grant. Investigators theorized that Tyler had forced Laura to retrieve the gun and may have used her to gain entry to the home. When she realized what was happening, she might have tried to protect her children, resulting in a struggle that ended in tragedy. Detectives pieced together the most likely scenario. Tyler had arrived late at night, demanding money that Michael no longer had. When Laura refused to help, things escalated. Michael confronted him and violence erupted. Tyler shot Michael, then turned on Laura and the children to leave no witnesses. To cover his tracks, he wiped the weapon clean and left it beside Michael's body, before fleeing into the darkness. The journal entries were turned over to the press, and public opinion shifted instantly. Laura was no longer seen as a monster, but as a victim, someone caught between loyalty, fear, and manipulation. The case that had seemed like a simple tragedy now appeared far more sinister. The town that had once adored the Foster family began to question everything they thought they knew about love, trust, and safety. And somewhere out there, Tyler Grant was still free. carrying the secret of what really happened that night. The police vowed not to stop until he was caught. But even as the manhunt intensified, Detective Whitmore couldn't shake the feeling that this case had more layers left to uncover. Something about the journal, the missing money, and the precision of the killings suggested planning, not panic. Someone had known exactly what they were doing, and the truth, though close, was still buried beneath lies and fear waiting to be unearthed. 2 weeks after the discovery of Laura's journal, the search for Tyler Grant finally came to an end. A tip from a truck driver led police to a remote cabin deep in the woods about 50 miles from Maplewood. The cabin was hidden by thick pine trees and overgrown weeds, the kind of place someone could disappear without ever being found. When the tactical team surrounded it in the early dawn hours, there was no sign of movement inside. They kicked down the door and found Tyler sitting at a small table, calm and expressionless as if he had been waiting for them. On the table were a few empty cans of food, a stack of newspaper clippings about the Foster murders, and a photograph of Laura folded neatly beside them. Tyler didn't resist arrest. He simply looked up at the officers and said, "Took you long enough." His lack of emotion unsettled everyone in the room. During interrogation, he spoke with chilling detachment, describing the events of that night as if recounting a business deal gone wrong. He claimed he hadn't meant for things to get that messy. According to his confession, he went to the Foster home that night to collect money Michael owed him. When Laura opened the door, he realized she had told Michael everything about their affair. Michael confronted him, and in the heat of the moment, Tyler shot him. Panic set in, and he claimed Laura screamed, trying to protect the children. He said he shot her next, then the kids, insisting it was to end their suffering. The way he said it, calm, emotionless, rehearsed, left the detective sickened. Even though his confession matched much of the physical evidence, parts of his story didn't align. He couldn't explain the missing $50,000 or why Laura's fingerprints were found on the gun. Detectives suspected that Tyler had forced her to handle the weapon before he used it, ensuring her involvement looked suspicious. His cold calculation suggested premeditation, not panic. When confronted with this theory, Tyler simply smiled and said, "You'll never really know what happened in that house." Those were his last words before he was taken to county jail. The trial that followed captivated the entire state. Every seat in the courtroom was filled as people came to witness the man responsible for the massacre that had destroyed the illusion of Maplewood's perfect family. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence: ballistics, DNA, Laura's journal, and Tyler's own recorded confession. His defense team tried to argue insanity, claiming he had been manipulated by Laura and emotionally unstable. But no one in the courtroom believed him. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts of murder. Tyler Grant was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Yet even with his conviction, the community of Maplewood couldn't find peace. The story had left behind scars that time couldn't erase. The Foster home was sealed off for months before being sold, but no one stayed there for long. The new owners reported hearing footsteps at night, faint crying from the upstairs rooms, and a soft creaking sound from the porch swing that moved even when the air was still. Some dismissed it as imagination, while others believed the house carried the weight of what had happened inside. For those who had known the Fosters, the tragedy changed how they saw the world. The family who once embodied happiness had become a chilling reminder that perfection can be a mask hiding unimaginable pain. Friends of Laura spoke about her kindness and her fear of judgment, how she tried to hold her family together while being silently consumed by secrets. Neighbors who had once admired their smiles now felt haunted by their own blindness, realizing how easy it was to overlook quiet suffering behind a flawless image. Detective Whitmore closed the case file with a heavy heart. He had solved the crime, but the truth brought no satisfaction. The evidence told the story of manipulation, betrayal, and desperation, but it couldn't capture the emotions that had driven it. The Foster family had been destroyed not just by one man's violence, but by the lies that had built their perfect life. In his final report, Whitmore wrote that the tragedy of the Fosters wasn't just the murders themselves, it was the illusion that had fooled everyone, including them. Years later, people in Maplewood still talk about that family. They speak of their smiles, their beautiful home, and the dark truth that shattered everything. The case became a warning, a reminder that even the brightest lives can hide the darkest secrets. The Foster home still stands, its white paint peeling, its windows reflecting only silence. And though time has moved on, those who pass by say that on quiet mornings when the sun hits just right, they can still hear faint echoes of laughter, a reminder of what once was before perfection turned to tragedy.